Board Monday, January 27th, 2025 meeting in the Warcoit Meeting Room, Mashpee Town Hall, 16 Great Neck Road North, Mashpee, Mass. 02649. Broadcast live on local cable channel 8 and 1072. Stream live on the Town of Mashpee website, www.mashpeema.gov/channel/8. It's 5 o'clock, and we're convening our meeting in open session. We will start off with the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and I'd like a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Review and approve meeting minutes, Monday, January 6, 2025, regular session.
So moved.
Second.
Tom?
Yes.
Michaela?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Thank you. Review of recommendation for appointment to the Capital Improvement Program Committee. Andrew Gottlieb, member at large. And Andrew is here tonight. Good evening.
I'm just offering to serve on the Capital Committee. I understand you have a need, and the time is short. I think I have a fair amount of relevant experience and can jump right in.
Yes.
And I heard your finance team was missing me, so I thought it'd be time to come back.
Can you speak up a
I
little
thought your
louder?
finance team was missing working with me, so.
I'm sure they have. And I,
Get away from this place, can you?
Yeah, it's like the mob, Tom. They keep bringing you back.
and I know what your work is like on the CIP committee. I've watched you over the years, too.
And I did send a memo to all the select board members regarding the policy that hopefully you all received.
Yes. Okay, so do I have a motion?
Make a motion.
Okay.
I'll second that motion.
John?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Michaela?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Thank you,
tomorrow.
Andrew.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you, I hope.
Thank you, Andrew.
Welcome back.
Okay, 5:05, we have a public hearing. Michaela, would you read?
Pursuant to Town of Mashpee General Bylaw, Section 156D, the Select Board will conduct a public hearing on Monday, January 27th, 2025, at 5:05 PM to address an update to the estimate for the private-to-public road conversion of Blue Castle Drive in Mashpee, Mass., as shown on plans entitled Road Taking Plan Blue Castle Drive, dated November 15th, 2024, and prepared by Cape and Islands Engineering. Said hearing will take place in the Warcoit Meeting Room at Mashpee Town Hall, 16 Great Neck Road North, Mashpee, Mass. 02649. Copies of the plans may be viewed in the office of the Town Manager and Select Board at Mashpee Town Hall. You can submit questions and comments via email to selectboard@mashpeema.gov prior to the meeting and date.
Okay, a new letter went out to the property owners, breaking down the cost. There was an error, a clerical oversight in the cost, and it was calculated based on 24 property owners rather than 26. Is there somebody here to speak on this tonight? Catherine? Oh, she is here. Didn't recognize her sitting in the back.
So as just explained, there was an error in the calculation, so the total construction cost has not changed, but the number of property owners that would be participating in that cost did so that was why the board is having a new public hearing because of that individual property. There's no change in the plans for the road construction, but
Is there anyone here tonight? Hi. State your name and where you live.
Tatiana, 38 Blue Castle Drive.
Speak louder into the mic.
38 Blue Castle Drive, Tatiana. Hi. So my question is, after we pay to have you, dig up, repave a curved road straight, what happens when the sewer comes to town? Will we have to repay for the road to be dug up again?
Catherine?
So I'm not sure where Blue Castle is in terms of the wastewater plan, but the policy at this point is when sewer does happen, that the sewer project pays for resurfacing.
Okay. All right. And what is the plan for, again, this is a curved road that will be bulldozed straight. So I'm just curious as to what's going to happen to my rock wall that's been there for more than 30 years and the bushes that have been there for more than 20 years. And other property owners who are affected in the same way.
Right. So the only location where the road is being shifted is at the very end of the road. I think you said you were number 30. So other than potentially a slight widening of the road in that area, we would not be changing the location of the road.
Okay, because when I looked at your plans, it seems like there is a significant widening.
That's the layout.
Okay.
So what the darker, if I may, this is the 40-foot layout. This is the existing surface. So we may do a slight widening, but we're not changing the location except where the road is outside of.
So
the layout
like
at
this
the end.
house would be affected, this house would be affected.
Correct.
Ernie's house would be affected, our house would be affected.
So there already is an easement where the layout, the road is outside of the layout, so that we are not proposing to change. That was already addressed with the subdivision. So there is an easement that was already taken to leave this portion of the road in place.
So how will it curve? Will it, like, I'm just curious, because if you can see, this is a significant chunk of my property with my rock wall being right here and my bushes being right there.
So, again, there may be a slight widening. We'll take a look at what is there. So that sounds like it may be within the layout for the road. So it's technically not on your property. It's within the road layout.
Where it's been for more than 30 years since the road was
But we're not,
its inception.
again, we're not proposing to shift the layout. It may be widened just to make sure that it is the minimum 18-foot width with the berm on each side for drainage purposes. So there may be a slight widening, but we'll take a look at the conditions that are there and avoid where possible any improvements that people have made within that layout.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have questions? Board, any questions? Oh, we do.
My name is Terry Ronhawk. I'm at 104 DeGrasse Road, and as I spoke at the last meeting, then you brought this up. So it seems like we have the same problem that the planning board faced 10 or more years ago when that was originally being developed, in that many of the homeowners on one end of the road are not interested in changing the road or paving the road. And so, and then you have this section in the middle of these new, now we have this section in the middle of these new homeowners that are part of that development. And my understanding is that part of their deed now that has been handed over from the developers, that they need to maintain the whole road from Great Neck Road South all the way to the end, which is what abuts our property at the very end of Blue Castle, which is all dirt. So, but there's a minimum amount that they'll need to do to maintain that road. It may just be some gravel every other year, or it's a minimum amount that they would be responsible for maintaining that. So those homeowners that are in the new development that have the paved road that the developer had to pave as part of his conditions, but he did not have to pave the entire road. And we've been through that, but it's the same problem that the planning board had at, then, is that with some of those residents that were originally on that road before the development started. But the end of the road, that is the dirt part of it, those are all, many of them are new homeowners, like ourselves and some of the neighbors around us. And like some of the people spoke at the other meeting, they don't want to live on a dirt road where they can't get mail and they don't have any access to town maintenance on the road. It's literally a dirt road. But, my concern that I brought up before is that there's also a fire hydrant at the end of that road, which is access for those 36 or 38 acres of town land that's all there, that's wooded area. And a couple of those houses, that fire hydrant would supply. And so my concern is that what would happen if there was a fire in that town land? How would they access it? This is a concern. So in all this rambling I'm bringing up is that the cost is prohibitive. I mean, I feel like if there was some responsibility from the town, or if we could go to town meeting and ask the town residents if they'd be willing to assume some of the cost of this, because the homeowners in the new development, they have paved in front of their houses, and they don't want to pay for the paving of or the maintenance of the other part. Obviously, the front part of it from Great Neck Road South to the new development is completely deteriorating. It's just pavement that's been left, and it's all coming up and it's big potholes. And then the piece that goes from the end of the new development to the very end of Blue Castle is dirt, mud. It's just a dirt road, and there's a couple houses on that, and there's also utilities and a fire department and a fire hydrant. So my question is there an avenue where the select board or the residents could petition the town for the funds to pay for part, or because the situation that we have is because that developer he wasn't made to because of the residents. I have conversed with the original developer, and he said he was willing to pay for paving of the whole road, but the residents at the time didn't want it. But here we are 10 years later, and a lot of those residents have changed hands. The residents have changed hands. So that's my question.
So your question, Catherine, do you want to answer a question?
I believe it's a question for you all. I believe the question is whether or not there is a mechanism for the town at large to contribute towards the road conversion costs.
Which there is.
As you know, that's not the process. Typically, if a private road wants to become a public road, then they bear that initial cost of upgrading the road. The town assumes, all maintenance thereafter. So that would be a change in policy and procedure for the board.
Exactly.
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, I do understand a lot of concern with this, but for that consideration, this is the same process that, a lot of other developments, a lot of other streets have gone through the same process. They were original private roads. Now, to become a town road, you have to go through this process, and my development, I did the same thing, some years ago, and it kind of stinks, but it is the same procedure that most, private roads that became town roads
Go
had to incur that cost. So,
David? Anything?
I'm not sure of a solution
No, no,
for the same reasons stated.
exactly. Anybody else? The other side? Anyone else want to speak? I need a motion to close the public hearing.
one more second, if you don't mind. Catherine, can you, the person that spoke earlier, so if they have is it hard to tell if they have a brick wall or whatever, a retaining wall, is that part of that, will that be, knocked down? Or is it something that can be adjusted? I mean, I don't know specifically, the house, the wall.
Right, the wall isn't located on the plan that I have,
So it's
I
safe.
can't say how close it is to the existing edge of road. Like I said, we would take a look at that if we need to do some widening. If the road were that close, we could look at the possibility of doing any necessary widening on the opposite side to avoid. I mean, that's typically what we will do in a neighborhood.
Okay.
We don't want to unnecessarily remove vegetation or other improvements, but ultimately that 40-foot layout is for road utility purposes. So
Yep.
it could be in the future, for sewer or something else that might need to be removed, but we would try to avoid it.
That's all.
Thank you.
That's all I
Thank
could
you.
ask. Thank you.
Okay, I need a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Tom? Tom?
Yes.
Michaela?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, so we don't need anything from us. Okay, review and recommendation to create the Mashpee Freshwater Pond Committee. Ashley Fischler. Hi, Ashley.
Good evening. How are you?
Good.
So this was a recommendation that came from both the Sewer Commission, the Environmental Oversight Committee, and I believe it was discussed here at the Select Board level. So I put together a proposal for the committee to form, and I just wanted you to take a look at it tonight. The purpose of this committee would be to establish a formal committee for all of the pond advocacy groups, and they would facilitate an interpretation of the new freshwater initiative pieces of material that are rolling out from the Cape Cod Commission. They would also help in resource management of our ponds and related water quality restoration efforts, such as what we're doing at Mashpee Pond, Mashpee Wakeby, and just being heavily involved with town staff to do so. Currently, there are numerous pond advocacy groups that really have similar goals. So it just makes sense to bring everybody in a room and have a representative from each one of those committees appearing before a group of all. So these are just some of the various town groups as well as county groups. We have a ponds group for almost every pond in Mashpee. We have the Mashpee Wakeby Lake Management Committee that's been functioning for years, and that was started to manage lake levels. And I've heard from that committee that they would like to remain in place. So I'm not recommending that they just completely fall apart. I think they want to continue their good work. The recommendation is to have a select board liaison and a tribal liaison or a tribal council liaison on this committee, or representing the tribal council and the select board, just because of management actions that could be associated here. So I just drafted a mission statement, because I know when you're starting a committee, you should get something from the select board to be approved. So I'll read it for the record. The Mashpee Freshwater Ponds Committee is committed to supporting the select board and town manager in their efforts to safeguard Mashpee's freshwater ponds as invaluable natural resources. Our mission is to protect and preserve these delicate ecosystems by promoting clean and healthy water, conserving their rich biodiversity, and advocating for sustainable use practices that respect the balance of nature. By fostering responsible stewardship, we aim to ensure that these ponds remain thriving habitats for wildlife, enduring sources of beauty, and vital community resources for recreation and education. This work is dedicated to preserving these treasures not only for today's residents, but for generations to come, emphasizing the critical importance of ecological integrity and long-term sustainability. So, just some of the primary responsibilities that I envision of this group. They would obviously serve as an advocacy group advising the select board of decision-making. Their focus would be in conservation and protection, education and outreach, regulation and compliance. That's there not to put together regulations, that's to work with town staff members to have the best regulations we can possibly have to protect these resources. Research and data collection, and our recreation management. The proposed committee structure would be 8 core members and 2 members at large. I wanted to model this around the Falmouth group. They have 1 technical expert on their committee. They have 2 government officials on the committee and 4 community members representing each one of our large ponds that is heavily used for recreation. That's not to eliminate people from the smaller ponds in town who could serve as the 2 members at large. We have 1 member from a nonprofit or an environmental organization that could either be a tribal member who's in the Natural Resource Committee, Natural Resource Department, or the Native Land Group, or something like that for that 1 representative. This is the goals that I envision for the group to carry through in both short-term and long-term. The goal short-term would come up with a comprehensive pond management plan and to complete assessments for all of our large grade ponds here in Mashpee. We're almost there. We have 1 more pond to go, John's Pond. Launch a volunteer program for all of the freshwater ponds. We'd like to see community members measuring clarity of the water column, temperature, and dissolved oxygen profiles. Those are critical pieces of data that volunteers can do that offer a lot of information to town staff in decision making. Community engagement, like to launch an informational session based on the information coming from the Cape Cod Commission's Freshwater Initiative and get it out to the community for their own use, what they can do on their own properties. And I'd like to see the group involved in open space and recreation collaboration with the Environmental Oversight Committee in completing that plan and following through with the plan, of course. Long-term, we're looking at sustainable recreation practices on our ponds and general waterway safety, working with the Director of Recreation, the Department of Natural Resources, and our Harbor Master staff. Stormwater and wastewater management, ensure that stormwater and wastewater management actions are effective for both freshwater and the bigger watershed picture for nutrient reduction. Habitat restoration, work with the town staff to complete necessary restoration work, invasive species treatment, and just be on the lookout, create a watch group. Open space acquisition is also long-term. The group would identify parcels with our partners and work with town staff to acquire those parcels. Data-driven management. The group would ensure that our town staff are effectively treating external sources and internal sources of nutrients and how we can educate the public to do so in removing those nutrients from the system and how they can do that on their own properties. So this is really fueled by the Freshwater Initiative at the Cape Cod Commission level. The Cape Cod Commission just recently came out with the freshwater pond buffer guidance, which is a very helpful document that we're going to have to educate the public on intensively for people who are living in and around ponds and freshwater environments, as well as coastal environments. And they're also rolling out data sets for each and every one of our great ponds that were tested in town. So we're going to get a lot of data, and we're going to need to interpret that data and come up with management actions. So it's going to be a group where we're going to do a lot of good work and work with town staff to start really taking a look at our ponds and our freshwater environments.
And you're going to be the face of this committee?
I can be if you want me to be.
You did an excellent presentation, no question.
So I think we would just be looking for an adoption of the committee and to just start advertising for some committee members.
Sure. I have a question. Go ahead.
Thank you. This is excellent. It's thorough and really well done. I have a question about a budget. Will this group have a small budget, particularly if they're doing, I understand for the most part they're working directly with staff and they wouldn't need a budget for that, but if they're doing education and community outreach, is there the opportunity for them to have a small budget to help pay for some of those things? Or is there grants?
Answer to the question, currently no, future, possibly.
And again, I can also offer, there is grants out there. You know, I'm also the grant person here in town, that if there is grants for community education and environmental education, I would try to secure them.
And if we're talking about a minimal cost for some educational brochure or pamphlet or something of that nature, then those costs can be incurred. If you're talking about something a little more significant, then it would go through the budget process, which this has not happened yet because we don't have a committee until you vote in the affirmative.
Okay. I just think having a small budget would be useful. And, you know, I have the greatest confidence in you finding grants, but there are incidentals that come up when you're trying to do community outreach, and I just want to speak up for that. But thank you for this work.
It's going to be a lot of staff time that I see. It's just really educating the public, and that's doesn't take much. Just being there and meeting people where they are.
Yep.
So for me, we did have concern with how to create the committee, and we wanted to respect the Mashpee Wakeby Management Group, and so we did ask Paul Bebo to come before the EOC. He met at our last meeting with some other members of the group. They did have some concerns. After talking through it with Paul and the committee, they felt as though the goals outlined in Ashley's proposal were a little more than they were willing to take on at this time, and kind of were satisfied with the work that they currently do on the Mashpee Wakeby Management Committee. So that's why they declined to kind of transfer that group into this. We fully understand and appreciate their willingness to explore the idea. I think ultimately we want to create a group that kind of brings all those smaller groups, some of which aren't town entities or committees, together to kind of cohesively attack the clean waters of Mashpee issue. And so the EOC did vote at our last meeting to write a letter of support for this project. Haven't crafted that and had it signed off on yet, but the vote was unanimous by all those present at the meeting, and to recommend this committee being established. I guess one question to piggyback Select Board Member Colombo's point is, what would you feel would be a modest kind of request for budget as seed money for the first year? And I guess my thinking is around the annual funding that we get from the Cape Cod Commission for nitrogen mitigation and such. Could that funding be allocated through the budget process, a small portion as seed money for a technical expert, and kind of to retain some sort of allowance for any kind of professional assistance you may need or educational opportunities that we could put forward?
I think in order to answer the question, it has to be identified in terms of what it's for. If you're looking for consulting purposes, I would remind us all that we have consulting, legal, engineering as a line item right now. However, if it gets into something that requires different types of monies for supplies, etc., then the answer is there is no budget at this particular time. There is no proposed budget at this particular time, but that doesn't mean that if it's a minuscule amount of money that we can't find it. and I know there's members of the Finance Committee sitting here somewhere. I don't want them to think that we got a lot of fluff, because we don't, but we certainly have enough to pay for incidentals.
Follow-up question to that. How would you frame minimal or not to exceed minimal?
Minimal to me is like a couple $100, but it may be different for her. So I guess we're going to have a follow-up discussion to determine what exactly the specifics are and come up with some sort of a plan.
Yeah, and David, a lot of the grants that are ongoing in town, like the MVP grant for Santuit Pond, the grants we're going for clean water, they have an incredible amount of public outreach that's looped into those grants. So there is funding through our grants that we currently have, and that's for water quality and education. And there's a ton of projects that are ongoing with our partners that I really don't foresee a financial burden or any need for finances at this time beyond printing and just securing space.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Well, actually, to today's point, so did you say that Mashpee Wakeby is not interested in joining?
No, it wasn't that. It was, we initially had talked about, what about converting the Mashpee Wakeby Management Committee into a freshwaters committee, as that's the town committee that the rest of them, I think, are community-based for the most part. So that one was kind of the natural identifiable committee to kind of transition into a broader Clean Waters Committee. But after talking with Paul and the committee, it was more work than they wanted to take on for all the other ponds. They appreciate the work that they do and remain committed to that. And so that's how we came to where we are today, to ask for the establishment of an entirely new committee, the Mashpee Freshwaters Committee.
So, yeah, but so this new committee would include Mashpee Wakeby, no?
Members of.
Members of.
Yes.
A
Members of,
a
but
representative
that other
of.
committee would still,
Still remain intact.
But they're not against this.
They're not against it.
No.
They actually liked the idea. It was just more work than they were willing to take on as that committee. And the
Okay.
people that are engaged want to stay engaged in what they're currently doing now.
okay. I guess if the committee is formed, I can see, hopefully at some point they realize, joining forces, there's going to be more strength in cleaning our lakes and ponds.
Work together, in other words.
But, I mean, it sounds like a duplication, but again, it's early on, and I just wanted the clarity on their understanding and direction, so.
And Madam, I just want to clarify for the board that when I was thinking of maybe one committee previously, it was out of concern for participation. But it doesn't appear as though participation is going to be a problem either for the existing committee or for the future committee if adopted. So therefore, the issue is moot.
Okay, any other questions? And then I need a motion.
I would make a motion to establish a new Mashpee Freshwaters Ponds Committee as
Second.
recommended.
Second.
And it's just under discussion, I am just looking for clarity as far as how is, if we, I assume we're all going to, adopt this motion, but that being said, what is the next step? Like, are all anybody that's looking to be considered, what's that process going to look like?
They will come before the board, and it will be an advisory role.
And are you going to be,
I think the interviews would be conducted by the select board, just because there is no formal group established, so we wouldn't be able to make recommendations, so you're gonna have to
okay,
do that portion. So we put the advertisements out there next, after the,
okay.
Okay. So I have a first and a second. John?
Yes,
David?
Yes.
Yes. Tom?
Yes.
And I'm a yes.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you for your work, Ashley.
Okay, introduction to the Community Opportunities Group, Inc., and the Mashpee Housing Rehabilitation Program, funding under the Mass Community Development Block Grant. Wayne?
So I just want to introduce, this is Wayne Darrow. He's from Community Opportunities Group. He's going to help the town facilitate in our Community Development Block Grant. So I just wanted to introduce him to the board and talk a little bit about the program. It was a select board endeavor for this application, and it was a near miracle that we got the grant, thanks to Michaela.
Michaela did a lot of work.
And your vote and support. So without further ado, here is Wayne Darrow.
Good evening.
Thank you. Nice to be here tonight. I had provided the board a summary of the proposed guidelines for the program. I just we're wondering if there are any questions about.
I have a couple.
I'm sure you do.
When I was reading the program administration and technical assistance, who's doing the property inspections?
So my firm works with a subcontractor, Bucanary Management Services. Don has been functioning as the rehab specialist for COG-administered housing rehab programs since 1998. We've been working together a long time.
And so you handle the whole thing?
We're here to take
Okay.
it cradle to grave.
Okay, all right, okay, that was my question.
He has an office here at Town Hall,
Okay,
as tiny as it is.
that was my next question. Okay, now, do you want to go on and explain the program?
Sure, just for those at home and those in the crowd. The goal of the housing rehab program is to take properties that are owned and occupied by low and moderate income households and bring them up to code. It's not a good housekeeping renovation program. We are addressing code issues. That's the real goal here, is to take individuals who have housing issues, and
Like lead paint?
it could be a leaking roof, it could be lead paint, it could be asbestos.
Asbestos,
Perhaps
yeah.
you have to hook into the sewer system. Perhaps there's been a change in your circumstances and you need handicap accessibility improvements to remain in that property. Energy efficiency, life safety issues such as carbon monoxide and smoke detectors. These are all goals of the program.
This is a great program.
It's a wonderful program, and the key to the program is the way it's financed. And that's, this assistance is provided to the homeowner as what we call a deferred payment loan, which means while they're taking on debt in the terms of, this is a loan, and under certain circumstances, it's subject to repayment, there is no regular paying on it. So you get to make improvements to your house without increasing your debt on a monthly basis. And this deferred payment loan is actually a declining balance loan. So over time, it decreases by 1/15 a year for a 15-year term. So if you stay in that home for 15 years after the project's completed, that loan basically becomes a grant to you. None of it gets paid back. But if for some reason you do sell the property during that 15-year term, then some portion of it will be repaid to the town. And the town can then take those funds and go out and assist another property.
Any questions?
So the qualifiers for these grants, for these funds are, you mentioned about, so it could be wastewater hookup?
Yep. Sewer connections are allowable costs.
So it's all by qualifying percent of,
You have to meet certain income limits.
okay,
So the limits are 80% of the median area income in order to be eligible for assistance.
okay.
Which that might be the one used for a lot of homes for hookups.
Right.
But it's exclusively for owner occupied.
Correct. So
yeah.
there's no reason you can allow investor owners, but we've made the decision to limit this, based on the application that was submitted, to limit this to owner occupants, and we're going to limit the maximum size of the property to 4 units. So there could be, an owner living in 1 unit, and perhaps they have a second unit that they're renting out.
Okay.
That's perfectly acceptable.
And so the loans are typically, I believe, associated to the title and deed and have to be registered as lien.
They will be
a
filed
lien
at the Barnstable County Registry of Deeds, correct?
County Registry, all right. As long as we make that clear, I think, in messaging and stuff, just so it's not a surprise to applicants, qualified applicants, it would be advisable. Great program, though, and thank you for helping out.
When we're working with an applicant, we actually give them a copy of the guidelines and ask them to read it, so that they know exactly what they're getting into, because I don't want to get them that far down the line and then have them back out at the end.
Right.
And they feel like they weren't explained something properly, so.
Exactly.
That's something we try to avoid.
I'm sure there's a lot of needy residents in the town that can greatly benefit from the program and will appreciate your assistance in this.
And this is hopefully just a starter program for future programs. There's been discussion about going in for additional funds in the upcoming funding round. There are a couple things I would like to discuss with the board. I think I do need some instruction on some things. One is, the way the application was written was that you would, application would be accepted on a first-come, first-served basis. In my experience with new programs, startup programs, it's maybe a little more of a level playing field if we establish some sort of open application period, give folks a 3-week period to submit an application, and every application that is received by that deadline would then be put into a lottery. And we would use a lottery to establish the waiting list. And then as we go on over time, as other people become interested in the program and need the program, they would be added to the wait list on a first-come, first-served basis.
Is this a matching grant?
There is no matching requirement for the homeowner. There are times when the homeowner might need to put in funding.
Okay.
We have set a cap of $45,000 per unit. If perhaps all the work they want done costs more than that, they could pay the difference.
That's where they would come in, okay.
Yep. Also, the assistance we provide is going to be based on the low bid we receive for the work. If they have another contractor who bid on the work that they would prefer do that work, they could pay the difference between the low bid and that second bid.
Go ahead.
Michaela, a couple of questions I had is, one, on the rehabilitation process, 10% retainage until final completion of the work. Do you feel that's sufficient? 10% seems a little de minimis to ensure the quality is done and work is done to a higher standard.
I mean, in my experience, it has been a sufficient stick to have to whack the contractors with. The program's going to be different than if you or I were hiring a contractor. In most of those cases, that contractor's going to want anywhere from 30 to 50% of the cost up front. These contractors don't get any money up front. They will not receive any payment until they've done the work's been inspected, and the work's been improved. So it's not a program that's going to work for every contractor. Some guys don't want to carry those costs. Other folks are fine with it. And then that 10% withhold, I mean, if these projects are $30,000 or $40,000, $3,000 or $4,000 is probably a fair part of their profit on it. So it's a big enough portion to.
Especially if they're carrying upfront costs. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's better. The second question is on the contractor participation. I don't know if there's anything preventing us from hiring local. With federal funding like this, and it's always good to put the money back into the community. And I encourage creating some sort of matrix that creates a preferential contracting process for local bidders that are able to carry the upfront cost in a position to do that. I guess I would, for me, rather than putting things out to bid every single time, if we created a kind of short list of contractors that are qualified bidders and, they're cycled out and maintained, if they don't do good work, then they're off the list, they're redlined. But if they're good contractors and they do good work and they're able to do it and they live in Mashpee, that I feel like I want to support those small businesses in town that are able to benefit from these funds.
And that's one of the win-win aspects of this program, is that in addition to providing the assistance to the applicant and the resident who's receiving the work, is it can be an economic development aspect to the program also for local contractors. So we will do our best to recruit local contractors. We'll put flyers and contractor registration forms with the Inspectional Services Department so that they're there. Maybe we'll put some ads in local newspapers announcing the program and that it's going to be available. But we are looking for general contractors. We're not going to be the GC and deal with the plumber and electrician and the carpenter.
Right.
We're looking for people who are licensed construction supervisors, licensed home improvement contractors, folks who are insured to the levels that we require them to be, and who have experience with this type of work. But I'm hopeful there's not a shortage of that locally. The more contractors we have, and what we try to do is something what you just suggested. We try to build this pool of local contractors. And one of the things we do when we're processing a project is we will have a walkthrough of that project. So we will send out a bid invitation announcing it a day and time when that property is going to be shown. In order to get the specs for that project, you have to show up to that walkthrough. That way, we know that the contractor knows exactly what the scope of this work is. It's not an estimator sitting behind a desk someplace throwing numbers at a project. So that's, we try to keep it as informed and controlled as we can throughout the entire process.
And I would always try to hiring local. On the tribe side, we had a bad experience with hiring somebody from outside of the region and not familiar with the building practices and the high cost of construction here on the Cape. And it was a painful lesson to learn. I'm not sure, I may have misspoke saying federal funding. This is a Massachusetts Community Development Block Grant. I'm not sure where the original funds are derived from, if they're from federal funds, but I know on federal community development block grants, there are stipulations that recommend preferential hiring and contracting relative to minority populations and tribal preference in particular. And I don't know if that makes its way down to if the funds are derived through the state from federal funding, then I don't know how that shakes out once it gets to the municipal level.
Well, they are federal funds. They do start at HUD, and they are allotted to the state of Massachusetts, and the Massachusetts Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities distributes them. But because of the size of these projects, there's a lot of regulations that, you have to have a $100,000 or $200,000 project for them to kick in. They don't necessarily kick in for a $30,000 or $40,000 single home project. And we are required to take the low bid. And that's a federal requirement that did come through.
Okay.
Michaela?
I have a quick question. Thank you for this, and thank you for taking us through it. My question comes back to something you said with the first year, that it would be a preference not to do first come, first serve, but rather to do a pool. Is that something, if this board voted to do that, is that something that we can do and have that amendment go to ELOC?
It's certainly something you can vote to do. I don't think it's a sufficient enough change in the program as you presented it in the application that we would have to go through any formal requirement. I will certainly let our program rep know and see if they have any comments on it.
I mean, it would seem as though with your vast experience doing that, if you think that that would be the way to move forward, that would be advisable.
Yeah. And I do want to remind the board that we do have emergency provisions in the program. So if we have someone who whose roof is leaking into their living quarters, or their heating system has died and they have a immediate need that's a threat to health or safety, we can, and they're number 15 on the waiting list, we can take them out of order, just address that
Issue.
emergency situation, and then put them back at 15 to wait for the general rehab work. And that happens a lot with startup programs. There's probably quite a bit of pent-up need in town since this program hasn't been running here. So I would expect that we will see a fairly significant number of requests for emergency assistance. And on our application form, we actually have we have a question that asks the applicant if they have anything that they think would constitute an emergency, to list it, and we'll come out and take a look at it.
Okay, good. Any other questions?
I have a few. First off, Michaela, thank you so much for bringing this forward, and
I have to say that I worked with a team, so I had help from a lot of people.
I remember the original request, and thank you for that. As far as this grant itself, what's the amount?
We have $365,000, I
Okay.
think, is the amount we have for rehab.
So, to that point, I know there's like a growing need of concern about hookups, the cost of hookups. That might be the biggest drive here. And so that leads me to my next question is, the cap you mentioned is like 45K, but it's 25K per unit. If I read on, it's a 25K per unit.
That's for another thing I need to discuss with the board. That is if the board decides it wants to grant the lead paint related work that's being done on these units. So it's $45,000 $45,000 per unit is the cap right now.
Okay. And my question to that is, we have 365K, I could see that maybe being drawn on very quickly. So my question is there something, can we talk about lowering that cap so we could have, we could reach more people in need, at least originally, or, consider those, under 15,000 as, first priority, so we could see what we're looking at. Like you said, mentioned, under a first 3 or 4 week period, let's gather them all up and see what we're looking at. Because in 4 weeks, you may have, $600,000 request, and if we lower the cap, we may be able to help a lot more Mashpee residents.
I would suggest against lowering the cap, but just, because it's the cap doesn't mean we have to spend to the cap.
And, right, it's up to.
No, but
Up to.
I get that, but what I'm saying is, all of a sudden, if someone requests a roof and this and that, and all of a sudden you have a few requests up to at 45,000, that could have been 4 individual residents being hooked up and their costs being covered by $10,000, $11,000 apiece.
I see what he's doing.
We're just speculating on the request
Yes,
right
I
now.
know.
Right, exactly.
You don't know what you're gonna
You
get.
can't, you gotta wait till you see it.
And if I could explain, as we move forward with this, we can submit, I believe the next grant is the date, the end of March?
It's actually due April 14th.
Okay, so you
Okay,
can start.
so there's another grant that we can submit to keep this going. And as we move forward, the first grant, the startup grant, to get everything in place, we had a late start. So we have a real short period of time.
Although I
The
wouldn't
next
count on
grant-
any federal funding.
Well, nonetheless, when the next grant's written and submitted, and we all have our fingers crossed, that money would come more quickly. So it's, once you are in the system and you do the work that you say you're going to do, you're much more likely to receive subsequent grants. And kind of keep things going.
I understand your concerns. Obviously, we want to help as many people as we can.
That's my only point.
But someone might really need the roof and need the heating system and have other needs too.
I agree with that, too.
Okay,
But your question did bring up another issue I wanted to touch on, and that was the potential of doing a portion of these deferred payment loans as actual grants. And EOHLC allows a community to designate up to $25,000 of work that's done specifically to address lead paint hazards as a grant.
oh, so if the house is sold, the homeowner
That
pays
portion would
that
not
back?
be repaid. Right. So you might do a $35,000 project, and $10,000 of it was lead paint abatement.
So that,
So the actual loan amount would only be $25,000. That $10,000 would be a grant on day one.
right.
How would you ensure quality work in that situation?
Well, the lead paint is going to have to be re-inspected by a licensed inspector, so it will pass inspection or it won't, and they'll have to go back and clean again and address what they didn't address the first time, so.
Would you hold them to the same processes to ensure worker safety in the remediation?
Absolutely, and in fact, in some cases, we will likely have to relocate temporarily the occupants while the hazardous work is being done.
Thank you.
It's, I'm hopeful that a lot of the contractors that we can attract are also licensed letters, that then you only have one person on site doing all of the work, and it just makes it go much more smoothly.
Thank you.
Very well thought out, and I too want to commend the team
Yeah.
and Michaela for bringing this forward. I know they're highly competitive, and good job.
Do we need a vote on this? I don't think we do we?
No.
Because it's just an introduction to the program.
No, he came in to see me, and I want to thank Wayne for the information he provided me and Ashley. It was a great introduction, and I appreciated all of the info provided, and we just wanted to get him in front of the board so you had a face to the name, and
And get the program
you knew who
started.
was behind the program.
Good.
Versus who coordinated the program. But this is the face behind the program, and I appreciate you being here.
Thank you, and good luck.
Thank you.
And
Welcome
just to
aboard.
let everybody know, there is a section of the website under the planning board page for the Mashpee Housing Rehabilitation Program. Good. Well, there'll be information, and we'll be posting dates of outreach events and just various pieces of information. You can look into ELOC and what they do and the Community Development Block Grant as a whole. And the contact information for Wayne and I is there.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. 2025 Watershed Management Plan Update, Notice of Project Change, GHD. Good evening.
Good evening, Mark Drainville with GHD.
Hi, Mark.
Just want to start out with a couple of quick opening remarks. So I want to explain why I'm here tonight. So this is a 2025 watershed update. So you might all know that in 2015, you had a wastewater plan that was approved, 2015. You are required, as a condition of that approval, to update that plan at the end of each phase. Okay, so you're kind of coming to the close of your phase one, and so as a requirement, this is an update of that. An important phrase that I want to mention that you'll hear a couple of times in this presentation is adaptive management. So adaptive management allows you to pivot your plan as things change within your plan. So population growth, development, improvements or degradation of water bodies. It allows you to kind of pivot your plan, and that's the point of updating this plan at the end of each phase. I want to stress this is a draft plan. We're presenting to you tonight. We will be presenting to the Sewer Commission, and then with permission granted by the town, this project would go through the MEPA process for further review. Okay. My colleague Anastasia Rudenko was the primary author of this work. She had an unavoidable conflict at a conference in Boston. So I just want to explain why she's not here tonight. And I'm going to do my best to make this 15 minutes. I will warn you, it's going to be a little bit longer, but not too much longer, okay? Probably about 20 minutes or so. So I'm going to go through some background, and I'm going to talk about a little bit of history. So first, the Mass Estuaries Project. I think you all know that documented the impaired water quality in Wacoit Bay and Pompanesett Bay. Both of those estuaries have monitoring station. There's 18 in Wacoit Bay, and there's 16 in Pompanesett. Those are monitored at least on an annual basis. The water quality in both of those estuaries has been declining, and I think we've all been seeing that in recent reports. So your 2015 plan had a couple of management strategies for meeting the nitrogen goals in Pompanesett Bay and Wacoit Bay. Those included municipal sewering, and the figure to the right is the plan from that 2015 report. It also included connections of new municipal sewers to existing private facilities. It had an extensive shellfish propagation program, and as I've mentioned earlier, a mention of adaptive management. Talked about this a little bit already, but it allows you to pivot your plan. So some plans from years past, you would do them and you would follow that plan for 15, 20 years. This is not one of those plans. We can pivot this plan as time goes on. So there have been changes. Another change that has occurred that I didn't mention is regulatory changes. So in July of 23, the state updated the Title V regulations that incorporated a watershed permitting process. That's important because it will eventually set a schedule on meeting your nitrogen management goals. So what the watershed permitting process, or what the regulatory changes did, is it provided towns with two options. One of the options was to not do a watershed permit, and in that case, you're going to go down a penalty path where you have to implement IA systems on all the properties, even if that's not the solution, and then you still have to meet your nitrogen management goals. The town of Mashpee has decided to head down the watershed permitting planning process, and what that does is once you do apply, and I'll talk a little bit about this, but once you do apply for a watershed permit, you will have 20 years to achieve 75% compliance with the nitrogen management goals. Once that 20 years expires, you would enter into a new 20-year permit to achieve the final 25%. So the town has submitted what's called a notice of intent for two of the watersheds. A notice of intent is the town telling the state that you are intending to go down the watershed permitting process. So for Pompanesett Bay and Wacoit Bay, you've submitted that notice of intent. For 3 of the watersheds in town, you've submitted what's called a de minimis application, which basically says you're contributing less than 3%, and that gives you an out on those watersheds. You don't have to do anything with those. All of these applications were accepted by the state, and the watershed permit application for Pompanesett Bay and Wacoit Bay are due no later than 2030. So as I mentioned, you have 20 years to achieve 75% compliance, so that's a 75% reduction of the nitrogen reduction that was identified in the MEP reports. That's an important distinction because as time goes on, you will obviously experience growth in town, and any additional nitrogen that's added to the watershed would need to be removed. So that's all something that would be incorporated as part of this plan update, as well as subsequent plans. So you've started your implementation. The primary and maybe the most noticeable is the implementation of the water resource recovery facility and the phase 1 collection system, which is the core central infrastructure for Pompanesett Bay. We've initiated a shellfish propagation program. There's also been feasibility evaluations done for municipal connections to existing private facilities. As you know, there are a number of private facilities in town. There were very specific private facilities that were identified in the 2015 plan, and those were evaluated in very recent years. And then a feasibility study on implementing soft solutions for restoring the Quashnet Unicus River. In addition, the phase 2 implementation has begun, at least with the design. Just as a quick reminder, oops. Sorry, getting used to the handheld and it's not working for me. Well, the blue area in the middle is the phase 1 in this figure, and then the 2 red areas above and below are the phase 2 areas. It says construction is expected to start in the spring. That's probably late spring at this point. And then there's been a continuation of this shellfish propagation program. So the plan approval, this watershed plan approval, right now we're conducting what's called a notice of project change. That is a DEP phrase for updating your plan. So I just want to explain what that notice of project change stands for. As part of this, we are evaluating assumptions that were made as part of the 2015 plan. And then you will see compliance plans for your nitrogen TMDLs, your nitrogen management goals. So included in this plan update are the nitrogen management strategies you see up on the screen here. So we're including stormwater management, fertilizer management, shellfish propagation, wetland restoration projects, as well as IA systems on individual properties and municipal sewering. So all of these nitrogen management strategies are coming into play to meet the overall nitrogen management goals for the town. And with regard to adaptive management, just to speak to a couple of specific points here, you know, there's going to be continuous monitoring of the estuaries in town. This will allow for the incorporation of any new projects that occur in the town. It'll allow for any kind of new technologies, or if the town would like to implement any kind of strategies that are not mentioned. So adaptive management will allow the town to make changes as you proceed through. So the initial nitrogen analysis was done through the Mass Estuaries Project. Those are very dated reports, but as we do these plan updates, we update the nitrogen situation within each of the watersheds. In addition to using those MEP reports, think everybody's aware that the town entered into intermunicipal agreements with your neighboring towns for both Pompanesett Bay and Wacoit Bay to establish your individual responsibility for nitrogen removal. So the Massachusetts Estuaries Project created reports for watersheds, and then by meeting with and creating these intermunicipal agreements, you've established what you are responsible for within those individual watersheds. So included also in this updated plan is we looked at estimated growth through 2019 and 2021 using water use data. We also considered the flow neutral regulations that the town passed in 2021 as far as how we would calculate what are called build-out conditions within the town. That was used to determine the extent to which these municipal facilities would need to be planned. So I'm going to talk through some of the nitrogen management strategies here. I'm going to start with some of the smaller ones. So the state does allow the towns to take credits for stormwater management and fertilizer management. It's small. If you look at the pie chart on the right-hand side, it's estimated that 12 and 13% are contributed from fertilizer and stormwater. The state allows you to take a 25% credit on those, so you can get 3% contribution from both of these. So what you would need to do with this is pass a fertilizer bylaw, which you have done. And then with regard to stormwater, you'd have to make some progress on stormwater reductions of nitrogen over time. Okay. Shellfish propagation. This is still part of the plan. The 2015 plan had a significant portion of it that was going to be looking to the shellfish to provide. We've learned a lot over time. Many people on the Cape have learned a lot over time. And also the reduction in the quality of the water in both Pompanesett Bay and Wacoit Bay prevent shellfish from being used too extensively yet. Okay? But this still remains a part of the plan. In addition, we have wetland and habitat restoration projects. Red Brook, Washington River, and the Mashpee River are all projects that are being considered and underway. These are not part of the plan right now, but once they are completed, they could be included in the next update of the plan. Private wastewater facilities. I mentioned that the private wastewater facilities were part of the 2015 nitrogen management strategies. There are no municipal connections to private facilities that are considered as part of this plan. However, I will speak later that there are some studies that are being done on this. So they're still part of the plan. We just have to identify the right opportunities for these.
I'm sorry. Could you just repeat that? They are still a part of the plan? But they're not.
Right now there are a couple of facilities that are under evaluation right now to potentially be used in that manner, but they're not identified in this current plan.
Thank you.
On-site Title V septic systems. So those are part of the plan. As I think you all know, there were Board of Health regulations that were updated in '24 that require IA systems within 1,000 feet of various types of surface water bodies. So we did include that as part of this plan, and that is going to assist the town in the nitrogen management strategies. These include all new construction, increases in flow, and any other installation or upgrade of a septic system. So right now, the approved systems are for 19 milligrams per liter. Just as a comparison, your municipal wastewater treatment facility will treat down to 3 milligrams per liter. However, there are systems that are that are currently under consideration for low nitrogen treatment down to around 11 or so. They're just not approved yet for widespread use. So the municipal sewering does remain to be a large part of meeting the plan. And I'm going to speak to that part and what's been updated. So on the right-hand side is an update of the phasing plan for sewering. It's primarily focused, or it is focused, on the Pompanesett Bay and Wacoit Bay. I have a couple of more zoomed-in areas, but you could see a couple of phases in the northern part of town, in the central part of town, and these are focused on the more densely populated portions of the town, and then in the southern part of the town, again with a focus on the two watershed areas. So we did I mentioned earlier, we did a build-out analysis. A build-out is a theoretical situation. It's how much growth could you experience given the regulations that are currently in place, and we use that to set some boundaries on how much your municipal infrastructure, how big it would need to be. We did some conceptual layouts for facilities in both Pompanesett Bay, which is the facility that's currently under construction, as well as one for Wacoit Bay. So the Pompanesett Bay facility, which is currently under construction, that is set up for a modular growth or for phased increases in flow. So as you need to add more flow to that facility, you would incrementally add to that. So you theoretically would not be in a situation where you have too much capacity at your facility and not enough flow to go to it, okay? The biggest challenge that's faced by that facility right now is finding locations for treated effluent recharge. Right now, there's enough space to discharge treated effluent for the flow that's coming for phases 1 and 2, but we need to find more locations for future phases. So that's the biggest challenge there. For Wacoit Bay, as you know, there isn't any infrastructure that's implemented in that area. The 2015 plan did identify a location for a treatment facility out just north of Johns Pond. The next steps for that area are to identify a final site for the treatment facility, as well as to identify treated effluent recharge locations. So this is a view of the current treatment facility, and the blue areas are the portions of the facility that would be constructed as part of phases 1 and phases 2. The green areas are expansion to accommodate the balance of the flow that would go to this facility from Pompanesett Bay. So there's enough capacity on this site to handle all the flows that are anticipated from Pompanesett Bay. I will emphasize, though, that the large blue squares to the right-hand side, those are the sand beds where the treated effluent recharge is sent. That is, we only have enough for phases 1 and 2 for that, right. So we need to look for other sites for that. But for treatment, there's enough space on this site. And this is a very conceptual layout of a facility on the Wacoit Bay side. This is one of the sites that was identified just north of Johns Pond. The next two slides show the makeup of the compliance, the nitrogen compliance plan for both Pompanesett Bay and Wacoit Bay. So for Pompanesett Bay, what you can get from this is the individual contributions of the two smaller ones, which are stormwater and fertilizer. Those are the red and the green. And then you can see for IA, which is purple, is probably the next one. The shellfish aquaculture is fourth. But the sewering is going to be required to handle the majority of the compliance in this area. It's a slightly different story for Wacoit Bay. The water quality in Wacoit Bay is not quite as degraded as it is in Pompanesett Bay, so it could support more shellfish aquaculture. There is a small contribution from fertilizer, stormwater, and IA systems there. But again, the majority is sewering, but not quite the same fraction as it was for Pompanesett. This is a very intense slide, and I'm going to walk you through this. What this shows So this is a different way to show a compliance plan, and it's showing how the different phases would be proposed to be implemented and how you can achieve your 20-year goal, the 20-year goal for the watershed. So on the left-hand side, you'll see the calendar year. It goes from 2020, so it incorporates your phase 1, and it goes to the year 2050. 2030 is the black line that's near the top there. That would be the beginning of your watershed permit. Prior to 2030, what this plan shows is the primary infrastructure in both Pompanesett Bay and Wacoit Bay being in place. And then as you proceed into your watershed permit years, you would be implementing in a sequence from going from Wacoit to Pompanesett back and forth to eventually come into compliance with your 20-year watershed permit. If you look to the second to the last column, I know those numbers are a little bit small, but what that shows is eventually you will hit 76% compliance in Wacoit Bay and 77% in Pompanesett Bay. So this shows that you would be in compliance with your watershed permit within the required time frame. So I apologize for this being small, but there's a lot of information to share with this. But basically, you would be in compliance with the watershed permit. And one other thing to note is that as you would go into what I would call your watershed permit years, 2030 to 2050, you would be doing somewhat smaller projects, sewer extensions, small upgrades to plants, because most of your infrastructure would be theoretically in place with this plan by that year. Couple of final notes, next steps. So what we're doing here in presenting tonight would be the beginning of a public review of this draft report. As I mentioned earlier, we'd be looking to go before the Sewer Commission also, and then eventually go through the MEPA process. Another next step would be continued implementation of your phasing program that I just mentioned to kind of, keep that moving. Prior to the year 2030, you would need to apply for your watershed permits. And again, that's to achieve 75% compliance. Prior to applying for that watershed permit, the state has a recommendation to do they call a fiscal sustainability evaluation, a financial plan that the town could look at to see how this plan works with the finances of the town. So that opportunity is presented by the state as part of the watershed permitting process. So I've mentioned treated effluent recharge evaluations. So those would need to continue on both sides of the town, Pompanesett Bay and Wacoit Bay. There is a screening analysis that's underway for Wacoit Bay, the Wacoit Bay area right now. As I said, we have enough capacity right now for phases 1 and 2 in Pompanesett. In addition, initiating the Wacoit Bay infrastructure conceptual layout is another recommendation that is currently underway. Another recommendation is to continue to evaluate opportunities for coordination with existing private facilities. That's currently underway in looking at Willow Bend and Southport. Continue to evaluate opportunities for satellite treatment facilities. There is a evaluation that's currently underway and is expected to be completed next month. That's a potential Mashpee-Wakeby satellite treatment facility. This is being done in coordination with diagnostic study for Mashpee-Wakeby ponds that was released at the end of December. So that's this facility has a potential benefit for nitrogen and phosphorus removal. Continue to look at regional options. The Joint Base Cape Cod continues to look at options there. They may provide an opportunity for the town to dispose of biosolids in the future. Continue coordination with your neighboring towns through the IMA meetings. And then finally, to continue the adaptive management program implementation.
Very good.
It's a mouthful.
It is. Thank you.
Careful. It's real simple. I mean, this is all good, but what I see you putting before us is just for the town's responsibility at that point. So then there's the whole system, which has to be tied into all of these homes. Is that something that you can work with the town on? Is that part of your job, or would it be up to us to tell the homeowner to go find their own company to go
Contractor
tie
to
it in,
tie
put it
in?
in the wastewater treatment system? I mean, the tie-in.
Do you want to talk?
I don't know, because we're not,
I mean,
We have a list of contractors on file, but go ahead.
So what was the specific question again? Sorry, Ashley.
my question is that what I've seen presented to us tonight was just the main system in all of the town's property. Where does the tie-in happen for the individuals that are abutting that line? Is that up to the town of Mashpee to do the tie-in, or the homeowner to do the tie-in?
So the town and what's being funding is getting the pipe directly to the property line. The homeowner is responsible to get from the house to that connection point.
So in addition to what you're doing, which the residents will pay for, eventually, we pay for the town's money, and then it's each up to, all those tie-ins are gonna be required by the homeowners, each one of them.
Yes, and that's why we're looking at different funding sources between the USDA, the Aqua Fund, and other opportunities that residents can take to help offset those costs. But I also got to remember that with the other alternative is you can replace your whole septic with an IA system, which will be a lot more expensive than your individual tie-in.
Right.
So it was either this way, or within 5 years, everybody would have to do that and incur a cost of $40,000+ for each property.
How much?
40+ thousand on the vineyard, and I'll use this as an example.
Just-
We're a little bit higher cost there.
But
One IA system was $40,000 on average to install. One of the reasons why I left the island was mine was $79,500 for my IA system. So I sold my house and
You want to do is
Moved to the Cape.
do a tie-in, right,
yep. So
right. And that's where the dollars come in, and they're pretty substantial fees as well. I mean,
yes,
Per
maybe like I said,
homeowner.
we're always continuing to look. Like today, I just learned with the new MVP grant, there's an opportunity for another possible funding source for individuals.
and tie in with your work that's been done is from the lot line in.
Yes.
Then the homeowner would own all of that to make it happen, get it done.
Yes, and one of the things we're doing is also putting ideas out there. We've talked with general contractors. Neighborhoods are actually talking together, hire one contractor. That way, it reduces the cost for mobilization. The contractor comes in,
Right.
knocks everybody out quick.
I saw that earlier. I was listening to things that were being said, and it would make sense to just hire one group to just walk through the whole town for the rest of their lives and build it, but give us a reasonable price. And I'd be, or give 4 different corners, and, but that was my question. But I am right, so that it's great that the wastewater treatment system is there. Very happy with that. Now it's up to the residents to reach in their pocket and pick up those.
Yes, and we always encourage anybody that has any questions about possible funding opportunities to please reach out,
Yeah.
and we can direct them to those.
And that varies. I know that individuals, the houses have set back a lot further than others, and it make it a lot more difficult and a lot more expensive.
Yes.
But I got you. Thank you.
Okay,
Madam Chair?
Michaela?
Mayor?
Yeah.
Thank you. I have a couple questions because I'm thinking about what residents will ask me and what they might want to know. And so the first one is really general. I'm really pleased to see that we've decided a joint kind of push, both staying with Papaneset and moving to Aquoit Bay. And you talked about there have been, assumptions have changed since the 2015 plan. Can you just, in layman's terms, say something about what assumptions have changed and why we're moving in this direction?
Yeah, I can mention a couple. So the plan has to incorporate growth that's occurred, so we have to incorporate actual growth. And then we project ahead. So today we can look at water use as it exists today. So that's assumptions that were made in the past, and we can verify them up to this point. And I guess the other thing is the the ability of shellfish and how much they can contribute. That's another major part of this, and the water quality in both Pompanesett and Wacoit has degraded to a point where they can only sustain so much. And I will say that shellfish are now seen more as a policing agent and not as a primary agent, and that's something that I think everybody in the Cape has learned over the past 10 years or so. So it's a couple of things.
That's really helpful. Can I continue?
Go ahead.
When I looked at your last slide, and I go back and look at the northern portion of town, and I see the area where we had talked about, in fact, I believe an IUP was submitted for SRF funding. Where are we with that cluster system, which brings me to another question, but where are we with that cluster system? What's happening with that? And is that indicated as part of this plan moving forward? Because I didn't see that on here.
Yep, so it is not on here. It's part of a separate evaluation that's being done to determine the cost effectiveness of doing that. So it's not part of the plan, it's part of a separate evaluation. Okay.
So,
sorry?
I'm just sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you, but as part of a separate plan, separate evaluation, that would be something that we would be able to perhaps use in other parts of town?
Potentially, yes,
Okay.
yes. And I just want to add one more thing, that evaluation is near done. It's intended to be completed next month, so.
The
February.
evaluation of the cluster system?
Correct.
Okay. And I have a couple more, and then I'll stop. Where you have next steps, I know you can't tell me exactly where we are in a timeline, but when you say that it's in process or it's underway, what does that mean? So, for example, the screening analysis to identify preferred treated effluent recharge areas in Wacoit. Are we, in your estimation, 6 months away from that, a year away from that? What's the thought process behind that? And is the same with, the other next steps. I think that's important for people to know.
So I would say that we have identified some good sites so your first question had to do with recharge in Wacoit Bay. So I think that we have identified some good sites. We need to do field work in order to further confirm how good the sites are. So I will say that there are complications in that area, including contamination plumes and Zone 2 drinking water areas. But we've identified a couple of areas that seem to be good spots. We have to do field work to confirm them. So this year, we should have a good handle on the sites, yes. So we have a study underway to target one site in particular. So we have to choose what we think is the best site, and that field work would be underway. Actually, we're under contract now to do that. So that's something that would be done, I would say, in the first half of this year.
That's really helpful. And what about Willow Bend and Southport and other systems? As I said, looking at a timeline, I know you can't be exact, but this year or?
Yes, yeah, I would say similar the first half of this year. We're still collecting some data from both, but yes, both of them, I would say we're going to have some good information the first half of this year, yeah.
That's helpful.
David?
One question that I have is, do you feel as though our current regulations are adequate in effectively implementing like a flow-neutral level of daily loads that support our boards and commissions? I'm concerned with, denying projects if they're expanding houses, the size of houses and raise and replace and everything else. Are we effectively able to deny a project if it's going to put more bedrooms and require more, a larger septic system? Because, what page is this? The nitrogen reducing IA on site septic system program requires installation of an IA system for all new construction and increased flow. I'm wondering, are our boards and commission able to implement that now to ensure that IA systems are being put in on expansions of units if they're increasing the bedrooms with the current regs?
You already are.
So
Effectively.
I think
I think it's more of a legal question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said, I think it's more of a legal question based on whatever our current regulations are.
That's right.
Depending upon what committee or commission you're referring to. Not to say he can't try to answer it.
I think what you're referring to in there is a Board of Health requirement, and I don't think that's from the flow neutral bylaw. I think that was a requirement for putting in IA systems, and I think that's the Board of Health, so.
I want to make sure that our regulations are coinciding and keeping pace with our approach. We're spending all this good money on, this is a very comprehensive plan, but are our regulations keeping pace with and effectively in line and cohesively are trying to address the same problems is the concern.
I know you want to ask a question, but I'd like to piggyback onto that. I don't want to cut you
I'm
off.
going to answer his question, too.
Okay. If I could. So, in your experience, I'm just curious, because we have a fertilizer bylaw. My question is, in your experience, who has been responsible for enforcing it? The reason why I ask is because it's just like if the town puts up a stop sign. If it's never enforced and everybody blows through it, then we got a problem.
Right.
If it's enforced and there are consequences, usually somebody stops and says, you know what, I think I'm going to correct that behavior because I don't want to face the consequences.
Yep.
So who in your experience has been historically enforcing that versus just having the bylaw that's on paper?
Perfect, Riley.
I like that question.
Yeah, that is a good.
Very good question.
That was a follow-up.
You're-
enforces all this?
So you're wondering who within the town?
That I would be responsible for, yes.
I actually don't know who within the town. I've never gotten to that point to see who it is within the town that's responsible for that, so I don't know.
I'd be interested in that research.
Yes, okay.
And I think it's something responsibly what we need to address to
Yes.
ensure enforcement.
That's
so that-
why I
Jared's
asked.
got the answer.
Jared, you got the answer?
So my last community I was at, we had the flow neutral bylaw, we called it net nitrogen neutral, and we also had the fertilizer bylaw. And the fertilizer was enforced by the Board of Health
Yeah.
only if somebody complained.
Only if
Because-
somebody what?
Only
Complained.
if somebody complained, like a neighbor complained that, geez, my neighbor has such a green yard, they must be doing something. Then what they'll do is the Board of Health will show up to wait for the contractors that are doing the yard work and say, let me see your fertilizer bags, which everybody already changed the bags anyways, and put everything into buckets and stuff so they wouldn't have to show it. So, but it's usually the Board of Health, and
So
it's very hard to enforce.
If I could.
Yeah.
So it's complaint driven.
That's how it was in our last town, because they tried following around the contractors, and they were wasting more time and money than anything else, so it became complaint.
So you just follow the lawn truck. You got to have somebody following the
Right.
lawn truck.
And our fines
Thank you.
imposed?
Yep.
They would be.
I don't.
Go ahead.
So I'm going to try to whip through these as quick as possible. So on your TMDL chart, actually, let me go back to, you mentioned about construction and you have to account for growth, casual growth, if you will, in the town. Wouldn't that also be, the impact on nitrogen, or the nitrogen impact would be less if that growth was, the nitrogen impact was with a treatment center? So if there were 5 houses built
Yes,
over an IA system, over a
yes.
treatment center, that impacts much less on the town than it would be otherwise. Okay. Then jumped back to the TMDL compliant plan, that chart. So the way I look at it is Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3. That would bring us to that second light green area, which would be the 19%. That would bring us to about 74%. Is that correct?
So,
Of the goal?
so the 42% is for Pompanesett Bay.
Okay, so that's
The next line is
exclusive.
Wacoit, so you'd be.
So it's just,
You can't count, it's not them both, it's 75%
It's, they're individually, we have to count, we have to be doing them individually.
separate, okay,
Yeah.
all right, perfect. You mentioned about the existing treatment center, the beds that are right now basically maxed out after phase 3. Or 2.
two.
So
So we would need to find new affluent discharge locations.
we either need to find 2 additional sites or petition the state to allow more flow to go in. So that there's a couple of options there, but there's, yeah,
Is it the state that controls the flow in the beds?
yes,
Oh,
yes.
And Rodney, of course, stole my fertilizer question, but to add to that, you mentioned on your chart, it's like 12%. And our last presentation, fertilizer was said to be not a concern at all. So that's,
which is hard to believe.
so by your chart, it's one of those things, it's a lot of small bites of the apple. But this tells me that fertilizer should be addressed.
So, yeah, so what I said with that chart is that 25% of the controllable load is estimated to come from fertilizer. The state is not allowing you to take any more than a 25% credit on that. So that's basically 3%. It's a very small amount of control that they're expecting that you're going to have over fertilizer.
Okay,
All right, that's what that amounts to.
I'm good for now. Thank you.
All right.
Wow.
A couple other questions I had was, as far as your data is driving the information, one concern is, we're, early on in the presentation, it was estimated growth in watershed since MEP estimated through analysis of the 2019 through 2021 data. And, I've kind of been hung up on the fact that post-COVID, you have this influx of people that are year-round residents and people able to work remote. So, is there a way to kind of offset that and ensure that we're capturing the current daily load with any level of certainty?
We can double check that to make sure that at least as we're completing the draft that we're in line with, I understand what you're asking. We could.
Only because, I feel like the census data was taken prior to 2020.
Yep.
Influx of all these people, 2020, and post-2020, that I feel like, data is going to be skewed until the next census is taken to find the actual population count year-round residency.
So we can do it, we can double check that. We do have an estimate, but we can double check to make sure that estimate is in line with reality. So sure, yep.
Then the other one was on your spreadsheet. As far as your construction appropriations and such, like, how do you factor in or account for cost increases over the next 40 years?
So, okay.
With any accuracy?
So, let me go back
We
to
won't
this
be here.
chart here.
It's sad that we're not going to see the benefits of any of this clean water for the next 50 years, minimally. That's rather depressing.
So this chart has dollar values in terms of 2024 dollars, okay? As these are transferred to a CIP plan, which Jared and I just sat down and did, we need to incorporate inflation factors into those, okay? So, something that says $1 million in the year 2040 here would have to incorporate inflation over time. What this allows you to do when you look at this in terms of 2024 dollars, it allows all of us to understand those dollars by today's numbers, okay? It also allows you to move the numbers around without changing them to account for the year. But as those are extracted and put it into a CIP, we would have to account for inflation factors, okay? So that's primarily what we would, what we would do. We have construction inflation trackers that we use to inflate numbers, and that's primarily what we would use.
Because I think it'd probably be safe to carry 2-3% increase, you know, for every year carried forward on a spreadsheet so that you're anticipating some of that, so it's not as so hard of a hit when it gets to CIP level.
So this is a draft plan. If you'd like us to incorporate, so the inflation factor that I would use would be more than that. We usually in the construction industry see 3 to 4%.
I don't think we want to see those numbers.
So I'm happy to do that, to put it in both terms and you know, kind of dollar values in the terms of the year as well as in 2024. We can do that. We can certainly do that.
I'd rather plan for the worst and hope for the best myself, you know.
Well, we
so-
kind of need to know the numbers,
Yes.
kind of.
And if it's in the plan and it gets approved, then at least we have a leg to stand on to justify the higher ask.
Exactly.
And when there's no surprises.
Just understand when you look at a 2040 and 2060 number, it's not going to, it won't mean as much as if you look at it in 2024 dollars, but we'll provide both to you, okay? So that's a good suggestion.
Okay, thank you very,
Thank
very
you.
much. Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to speak now. Susan Dangle, President of Save Mashpee Wakeby Pond Alliance. I'm sitting here tonight, I know I've talked to you about educating the public and how confused the public is about the sewer, how it's affecting their taxes, which it really hasn't yet, other than the whiff. But this is another colored plan with more colors and a chart like this, and I just worry about how we explain where we're going and what we're doing. I've been part of the Cape Cod Ponds Network and following other pond groups and towns. The town of Falmouth just did a presentation similar to yours with less of this and a little bit more colors that showed where the most impaired parts of the town were, how they're targeting, where they're going to get the best bang for the buck. And it's a little easier to follow, so perhaps in the next iteration with the sewer commission together with you, you might think about making it more of a roadshow for the public to understand. I mean, I come to all these meetings, I go to the sewer meetings, I get it, but for the most people, not understandable in the least bit. And in fact, I just asked the sewer commission just the other day to consider it's on the front page of the paper. And people are talking about it. So that would be my comment to you. And with regard to the north part of town, Pompanesett Bay goes clear up to Quaker Meeting House in the town of Sandwich. So there's no sign that says, don't enter Mashpee. And we learned from the diagnostic pond study that nutrients are entering Mashpee in good, solid numbers, contributing to the degradation of Mashpee Wakeby Pond. Those nutrients flow, as Ed Eigner pointed out, through Wakeby to Mashpee Pond, to the Mashpee River, and into the bay. So why we're not putting this consideration of this cluster system into this new plan, I'm shocked. Unless in your adaptive management, it's something that you can pull out from time to time and put it into other places, but it's stunning to me that it's not there, to be frank. So, and we've gone to the point where we've asked for SRF funding for it. So I'm just confused. So we might want to just tie that up a little bit more as well as this project goes on, and hopefully you will invite public comment at the joint meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I provide one quick comment on the Mashpee Wakeby? So that is an area that required more study than this plan usually provides, and that's why it's subject of a separate, more intense study.
Okay, thank you.
One other thing, to Ms. Dangle's point, is there a way to establish critical and impeded zones in and around some of our water bodies where they're identified as critically impeded areas, and suggest or advocate for kind of regulations that's specific to, with signage and delineating these areas as impeded areas as you're entering a priority zone, and through the intermunicipal group, collectively try to address those areas where we have adequate legislation at the municipal level to address that, recognizing the fact that these areas are significantly impeded and they have a lasting impact on everything south of them. Like, how do we get there?
We can look at that. Yep. Let me look at that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Now we'll go on to communications and correspondence and new business. Acceptance of resignation from the following. I have a question, Rodney and Wayne, maybe you can help me on this. We have Affordable Housing Committee, Doreen Lawrence, member at large. We kind of just started getting people involved. Can we set up a meeting and maybe have whoever's liaison to that committee? And I will step up too, just to have an information meeting with the people and get it going so they can start with the committee.
I think David's on top of that. I did notify Dave about the fact that we had to have him kind of set up that first meeting so that they could organize, and then from there, he could be the liaison back.
Okay. Have you?
I'll follow up on that.
Would you? And I can help you with that too, David. So I have a Affordable Housing Committee member, Doreen Lawrence, member at large, term ends June 30th. It's a shame we hadn't started the committee to get her going, and she's resigning. So I need a motion
So moved.
and a second. John?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Michaela?
Yes.
Okay. Cultural Council, Winnie Johnson Graham, member at large, term ends September 30th, 2027. I need a motion to, and also a letter of regret.
So moved.
Second.
Tom? Tom?
Yes.
Michaela? Yes. David?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. And then we have a recommendation of an appointment to the Mashpee Council. Diane Brace, member at large.
She's here.
Come on up. How are you?
Good, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you. And as a part-time resident of Secaucet Island on McCoy Bay for the last 30 years, I learned a lot from you.
Oh, good. And she has her, they have the form filled out, so everybody agrees. David?
Yes.
I'm happy to say just a couple words about my
Sure.
experience.
Please do.
That maybe
Please do.
is there. I started as a professional ballerina for over 25 years in arts and cultural programming. I've been part of my professional life ever since.
Oh, good.
Up to, I just retired last year from NPR after over 20 years in senior positions there on cultural and news programming and initiatives. So I feel like I had worked at the national level a lot in multiple arts organizations.
And now you're ready to give back.
Exactly.
That's good.
Exactly.
That's very
Now that
good.
we've both retired and we'll be more full-time here.
That's good.
To get involved locally.
Very good. Everybody looked over. Anybody have any questions? Okay, I need a motion and a second.
So move.
Second.
Second.
John?
Yes,
David?
absolutely.
Yes.
Michaela?
Enthusiastically, yes.
Tom?
Yes.
And thank you, and I'm a yes.
Thank you, and a quick
Enjoy.
thank you to Lee Smith, the chair of the.
Yes,
Cultural
I saw she,
She's been great along the
that's
process.
great. Thank you, Lee. Okay. Election warden for the town of Mashpee, Todd
Cipriani?
Chipperat. Come on up.
Hi, I'm Todd Cipriani. My wife and I moved to Mashpee 5 years ago, now retired. Shortly thereafter, a couple of years, I volunteered for an election worker. So I've been doing that for the last 3 years or so. And it's come up in several discussions with Deb and her team about becoming a warden, and so I volunteered for that. And so they asked me to be here in case you had any questions.
Anyone have any questions?
I do not.
I know it's a good way to meet people in town.
Sure.
It's great, and I thank you.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
For volunteering. Okay, I need a motion in a second.
Motion to approve, Todd
Second.
Cipriani.
Tom?
Second.
Tom? Michaela?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Yes,
And I'm a yes, and thank you so much. Enjoy.
thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is Cape Cod Municipal Health Group.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
If I could, this is the Benefits Administrator at Human Resources. This position is generally by the assigned duties of the position. So she would serve as the alternative, and the Benefits Administrator has served in the past. We had a turnover, so this is just an appointment for her because of her professional capacity.
Okay. So do I have a motion to,
Motion to approve Carol Rojo for Cape Cod Municipal Health Group.
Second.
okay, Tom?
Yes.
Michaela?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Certification of hiring process for public safety dispatcher.
And I can attest to the fact that the policies and procedures of the town were followed. You should have a memo attached, so looking for certification of the process only.
Okay, motion
Motion to certify the process.
Second.
Tom?
Yes.
Michaela? David?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Review the application for temporary sign permit, 106 Falmouth Road, Boston Interiors. Okay, this is an annual event. They do it. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
John?
Yes,
David?
Yes.
Michaela?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Review of road race applications, annual Love in Life, 5K. Maureen McNamara? She didn't have to be here, because this is something that's big.
Annual event.
it's renewal.
It's an annual event. Okay, do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve special event application, road race.
Second.
Tom?
Yes.
Michaela, you have a question?
I do have a question.
Okay.
And I would like to approve this. My only question is on page 2 of the application, that none of the boxes are checked. Do they need to be? Like type of race, is it running, walking, biking, wheelchair, or all of the above? And I don't know if they need to be.
It's an annual event, so I don't know,
As I said, I don't have an objection to it. I
Right.
just didn't think
Loving
that's an issue.
life.
I don't know if the blocks were, or boxes were an oversight. I do note that there's narratives
yeah.
at the bottom.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that it was properly reviewed, but
Just
we can
didn't,
double check on that just to make sure.
We
Okay.
can vote on it
has been
tonight
reviewed,
pending
and
your,
I do,
Yeah, it looks like they kind of just, like
Checked
you're
it.
right, said the narrative below each box.
Yeah,
Yep.
they put it
And-
down here.
and it doesn't show.
Instead of putting it in the boxes.
Yeah, they just told you what it was. Okay. So, do I have a motion in a second?
Yes.
Okay.
We do.
Tom?
Yes.
Michaela?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
And John?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Discussion of policies, authorization to replace selectmen with select board in all Select Board policies.
Madam Chair, if I could. So I was reviewing a policy the other day, and long story short, it came up. I noticed that it said selectmen, so I requested staff to put this on the agenda. Essentially, I'm asking for approval to change every single policy that says selectmen to select board. And we're just going to do it automatically for every policy rather than voting individually on every
Exactly.
policy.
I agree.
I don't want to bore you to death.
No, that's good.
But we'll take care of it, just authorize us to do it.
Okay.
Motion to approve the change from
Select.
anything, anywhere you see selectmen,
Policies.
any policy to, from selectmen to select board.
Second that motion.
Okay, John?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Michaela?
Yes.
Tom? And I'm a yes. Public comment?
It was just Susan.
It was just Susan. Okay, old business, additional, liaison reports. Quiet,
Get
okay.
into the school after this.
Okay. Water quality updates, we kind of had that tonight. Town manager updates.
The Patriots are not going to the Super Bowl. CIP meetings are scheduled this week. FinCom Thursday night. Operating budget should be presented without an override to the Select Board on February 10th.
Sounds good. No executive session. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
John?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Michaela? Yes. Tom?
Yes.
And I'm a yes.